Om. Hariom. We will begin our workshop. Welcome again, everybody, to our September workshop on understanding neurodiversity. I just want to begin by introducing our speakers for this evening. We have Sudhita. She is a certified ADHD life coach who draws from her extensive experience as an educator, entrepreneur, and program manager. As the founder of Leverage Your ADHD, Sudhita uses a strength-based approach to partner with professionals so they can embrace their ADHD to live happy, productive, and fulfilled lives. Sudhita was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult and is the parent of 2 neurodivergent adult children, along with her neurotypical husband, Srinivasa. Our next speaker is Anantya. Anantya will be sharing from a personal perspective. He is originally from New Delhi, India, but was born in Dubai and raised in Singapore. He has a bachelor's in economics and government from the London School of Economics and recently graduated with an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. He is very passionate about neurodiversity, given his own journey with dyspraxia, a neurodevelopment disorder that affects fine motor skills and eye-hand coordination, visual memory, and processing speeds. And our next speaker will be Neelu. She is sharing from a parental perspective. Neelu moved to the US 24 years ago and has lived across the country before settling in North Carolina 14 years ago. She wears many hats: a professional, a trusted friend, and a connector of people. While Neelu enjoys all these roles, what truly defines her is being a loving partner to her husband and a devoted mother to her 2 wonderful sons. Her experience as a mother to a neurodivergent son has shaped her passion for mental health and the well-being of individuals and communities. And we are so excited and have so much gratitude to them for sharing their personal experiences with us this evening. And I want to introduce our moderator for this evening, Rachna. Rachna has been practicing as a pediatrician for over 20 years, spending a majority of her career in Illinois and more recently in Atlanta, Georgia. She is board certified in pediatrics and in obesity medicine. She has a special interest in preventative care with regards to both physical and mental health. She has been part of the Chinmay Mission community for 15 years, teaching various grades of Balvihar, and is part of the parenting culture Sevaks team. Being a student of Vedanta has been transformational in every aspect of her professional and personal life. And before I hand it over to Rachna, I just wanted to let everyone know that at the end of the evening, we will be doing a Q&A part of the workshop. And if you have any questions, there's a link that will be shared in the chat for Slido. At any point, any question pops in your head, please do, you can ask anonymously if you would like, but please do ask all your questions on Slido this evening. And with that, I'll hand it over to Rachna. There you go.
Hariom, thank you so much, Deepo, and thank you all of you for being here on this Sunday evening. I am going to just share a little bit of an introduction before inviting our panelists to come and share their stories. And so with my introduction, I'm going to just share this slide with you, not necessarily to make you hungry, but rather just to appreciate the beauty of Bharat and her diversity. So whether it be the languages or the food, the clothes or the people, each is appreciated for its own unique yet mouthwatering quality. So when we look at these 2 plates at the bottom of the slide with dal bati on one side and pani puri on the other, even though they may look similar in shape and size, and they're made from similar ingredients with wheat and water, nobody would try to substitute the bati and dal bati for the puri and pani puri, or the other way around. But both are very much appreciated for their own qualities. So other than making all of us crave pani puri tonight, why am I talking about food on a Sunday night? because this diversity, whether it be the languages, the people, or the food that we see across Bharati culture, is so divine. Bhagwan Krishna teaches us that there is unity in diversity, and more importantly, there is diversity in unity. He lives in each of our hearts, and he teaches to embrace diversity with love and respect. Vivekji often shares with us that if you love divinity, then help further and facilitate. So one way that we can show our love for divinity is to become an advocate for inclusivity and acceptance. So with that reflection, let's explore about neurodiversity. I'd like all of you to think of someone with neurodiversity who's in your life, and please share some qualities or traits about that person which you admire. This could be yourself or someone else, that's up to you, but please put your reflections in the chat as and when you feel comfortable. As you're thinking about this, I'll just share a little bit about neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is an umbrella term which can encompass many forms of human diversity with regards to how people's brains process. It can include dyslexia, ADHD, autism spectrum, dyspraxia, sensory processing challenges, all which are natural and valuable forms of human diversity. I'll share some brief descriptions about ADHD and autism, and then if one of our panelists, Anantya, would be comfortable too, Deepal had shared some information with us, but we'll ask him to share some more about dyspraxia. People with ADHD may have challenges with hyperactivity or impulsivity. They may have challenges with organization and or inattention. These challenges can sometimes cause difficulties at home, at school, at work, and even in relationships, but they are not the result of an individual being defiant, nor being able to not understand instructions. The brain is wired differently and processes information differently. People with autism may have challenges with social communication and interaction, with restricted or repetitive behaviors or interests, with different ways of learning, of moving, or of paying attention. People without autism may also exhibit similar challenges in different degrees. One of our panelists, when we were having our meeting earlier, she beautifully shared, Neelu had shared, that if you know someone with autism, you know that person, you don't know autism, because each individual has their own journey and each individual exhibits their own strengths and their own challenges. Autism spectrum is not linear. Using words like high or low functioning, more or less autistic can be harmful. But if you explore this wheel of life, one person may have more or fewer traits. We often learn in our Vedanta class that as a result of our vasanas, our life is custom designed for our own individual needs. That is the case with many forms which fall under the umbrella term of neurodiversity. Sometimes people may wonder about a cure for autism, just as there is not a cure for a neurotypical individual, so there is not a cure for a neurodiverse individual. But that being said, there are things that each of us do to try to reach our highest potential. For some of us, that's attending Vedanta classes. For some people, that may be attending ABA therapy or speech therapy or occupational therapy. Sometimes there may be overlap with autism and anxiety or autism and ADHD. Someone with anxiety or with ADHD may benefit from therapy or medication. This is a very tailored for an individual approach, but it is helpful to have a diagnosis of autism because oftentimes there's many resources that school systems have available. Some states are better at that than other states are, but there's a lot of benefit in knowing if there's a diagnosis of autism at least from a pediatric perspective, and it will be wonderful to hear from an adult perspective from our panelists, because there is a lot of tools that children can get to help them reach their maximum potential. A lot of times in our Vedanta classes, that's what we're frequently talking about, is how can we reach our maximum potential. So I just wanted to share some things that we can think about in terms of understanding neurodiversity and creating acceptance. So one is that recognizing that everyone processes information differently. Appreciate how different ways of thinking and problem solving has advanced our society in arts and technology. Names like Elon Musk and Emma Watson come into mind, but there's so many others. When we connect personally and we learn from one another, like our panelists are so thoughtfully sharing with us today, it helps us then lead by example, practice the science of oneness, practice Vedanta, and create a culture for acceptance and inclusivity in our homes, in our family, at our schools, and at our place of work. So I hope you take that last one as a take-home point from today's talk, is really that's something that each and every one of us can do, is try to lead by example and practice the science of oneness. That's why all of us are here. So with that, I had asked all of you to share in the chat about people who you may know. I have two people who are very close to me, my niece and my nephew, and I just wanted to share something that I admire about each of them. So I admire my niece because of her conviction. She knows her mind like nobody else, and she does not waver, and she does not get persuaded by another. And her strength gives many of us that inspiration to be strong. And my nephew, although he's at Ohio State and studying engineering and, is quite grown up at this point, gives the best hugs in the whole wide world. And so that is one of my favorite things about getting to see him, is the hugs that he gives. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask if people, would you mind having all of the panelists come, and we will go ahead. Let me see if I can stop sharing my screen. So we can go ahead and spotlight everybody and get started with our questions. And I know people had joined after people had done everybody's introductions, but just in the interest of time, because there's so much to share, as you're sharing about yourself, if you would give a brief introduction, it would be wonderful. Anantya, could I ask you, please, if you would share your personal experiences with relation to neurodiversity?
Yeah, sure. First of all, just wanted to thank everyone for having me. This is my first time at a Chinmaya Mission event, and yeah, this is absolutely wonderful. So thank you so much. So, just to start off with, the neurodiversity that I have is called dyspraxia. So it's a neurodevelopmental disorder that affects your ability to process information. It affects your motor skills, eye-hand coordination, your visual memory. And, I guess my journey really started when I was about 6 years old, right? I spent primarily the first few years of my life in New Delhi, India, where neurodiversity isn't really part of the lexicon. And, I ended up moving to Singapore, and I went to an international school in Singapore with primarily a British curriculum. And I think teachers very early on, I think in grade 2 or grade 3, realized that things weren't right. I was struggling with basic motor skills in the classroom, while all of my peers were able to cut, do arts and crafts and cut properly with scissors and tie their shoelaces and, have neat handwriting. I wasn't able to do any of these things, right? And I was kind of lagging behind. And I think the other thing was, the teachers noticed the kind of cognitive aptitude, but they saw me kind of zoning out in class and not really picking up any of the information that was being fed to me. So very quickly, the school put me in like a learning support environment, which is, it was a special group. They took me outside of the classroom, and it was primarily a special group of kids with neurodiversity and with challenges learning. And, when this happened, my Indian parents they got very, very agitated. They weren't used to hearing about this, and they were worried that I would get labeled, and they were primarily worried about how that would affect my achievement and performance and my ability to go to university and all of those things. So, the way that my parents intervened was, one thing that they did extremely well was that they raised me with a growth mindset and made me feel like, the sky is limit and no obstacle could get in my way. But the other thing they did was, like, whilst they knew about the diagnosis, they didn't really want to talk about it as much. So they never really formally told me I had this thing called dyspraxia. And as a result, they didn't really want me to get accommodations because that, they thought that that could affect me and make me, lag behind my peers. And, my academic journey and my school journey was an interesting one, right? Those symptoms of dyspraxia definitely lingered, as I went into my adulthood. And there was a definite amount of bullying because I had challenges with picking up social cues and had challenges with social anxiety. A lot of these things sometimes exist alongside some of these learning disorders. My academic performance was very inconsistent, primarily because of some of these challenges, right? I would have to work twice as much as my peers to kind of keep up in the classroom. And, I would also struggle to lag behind, struggle to complete exams and tests on time. And that led to more anxiety. But, I think one of the unique gifts that came out of all of this entire period, which we will talk about later in this panel, is just the hidden superpowers that I developed, right? And the work ethic, the resilience, the determination. I used that to really get over some of my weaknesses and challenge some of my strengths. And, although I would start off poor academically, I was ultimately able to do really well academically, right? And I ended up, graduating closer to the top of my class and, went to the London School of Economics to study economics and government, which was one of my dream courses. And, at LSE, that's when my journey took a different turn, right? Where I felt like whilst in high school, I had all these tools, I had this infrastructure, I had the tuition, I had the home environment to overcome some of my challenges presented by the dyspraxia. But when I was all alone in London, that's where things started to become very challenging. First year was fine, but second year with these really challenging economics papers, I ran out of time in all of my exams and I got really poor grades. And then one of my buddies, he had dyslexia. He convinced me to get tested. And luckily my university had the right kind of testing infrastructure. And I finally did that and I got re-diagnosed probably like 13 or 14 years later, right? And that just made a world of difference to my self-confidence and self-esteem. And, it saved my degree as well. I was on the risk of graduating with a really bad degree classification. And because I got extra time accommodations in my final year, I ended up getting good grades. And it just made so much sense in terms of what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, and how I need to plug the gaps, and that I wasn't actually stupid. It was just that there were these, neurodevelopmental challenges that were holding me back. And since then, I haven't really turned back. Like I've just been able to really figure out what I need to kind of do well and get ahead. And surely there have been challenges along the way, which I will get into later on. But I've been able to figure out the right path. And at age 30, I'm much better off now than I was when I was growing up.
Gosh, Anantya, thank you so much for sharing in such a vulnerable way, even about the bullying when you were younger, but even about the growth that happened and just finding your superpower. I think that's amazing, truly amazing. Sudhita, would you share with us from your professional experience and your personal experience about neurodiversity?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me here and, arranging this panel. I know how much effort went into it on the back end of things, and I probably still saw only the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure all of you together, you have put in a lot more hours. Anantya, I really, really appreciate what you shared, because a lot of your story is a lot of my story. It's the same thing. We can replace dyspraxia with ADHD. I was born in the US and I was brought up in India, and then I moved back here for grad school. And if you ask anybody around me, my parents, my teachers, one of the things I always heard growing up is, Sudhita, you have so much potential, but. And that but was my grades were inconsistent. I did really, really well in some things and had challenges in the other things. One of the things when I reflect and I reframe my journey through the lens of ADHD, I look at was I was actually working hard, but I was in a system that was not designed for my brain. And, Anantya said that, Rachna, you said that these are neurodevelopmental disorders. These are not behavioral disorders. This is not because we are behaving well or poorly. None of us checked a box in the womb saying, hey, I want this, I don't want this. This is how we are born, just like the color of our eyes or the color of our skin or hair or whatever else external features we look, that is how our brain is. We look at things differently. Our brains function differently. Our brains, neurochemistry is different, structure is different. Now that comes out in different ways, except we are different from the majority population. And that is where I love this term of neurodivergence and neurotypical, because typical is also not all people are alike, but it's the majority of the people. And then there's all of us with learning differences. It could be autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, all of that sensory disorders. And Rachna, you did a fabulous job with that PowerPoint. Thank you so much of highlighting that. So my journey, actually, I struggled academically. I had some great opportunities. Some of them, now when I look back at that time, I thought something was wrong with me, right? If you look at different areas of your life and you're struggling in that, when you look at it yourself, you look at it as the common denominator as being you. So that means something must be wrong with you, which meant that I had, lower self-esteem and confidence. I was working hard, not getting the results. And I was always on the fringes of things because I didn't always understand how everything else worked. It didn't compute in my brain about how people reacted to things or responded to things. And I was passionate about things that nobody seemed to care about, right? And sometimes I would get labeled as lazy and unmotivated. Long story short, I was diagnosed over 22 years ago, but it was a really poor neuropsychological evaluation. And I was given a three-page document. And anybody who's ever looked at a neuropsych evaluation will know that 3 pages does not cover. They're usually running the 30 to 50 pages of that, and said that, you have ADHD, manage your stress, take some vitamin B, and that was it. It wasn't until my husband and I started noticing things in our children is when we went, huh. But even then it didn't all add up. But some of what my children were struggling with is what I noticed. And when we got them diagnosed, both of them came up with different types of ADHD, and I couldn't find coaches for them. And when I went back to our neuropsychologist saying, can you give me a reference to somebody who's good? And he said, well, Sudhita, have you thought about becoming a coach yourself? And I think you'd make a good one. And again, Bhagwan provides, multiple years later, everything came together for me to, train as a coach, have some of the top people in the field mentoring me, and realize that this is kind of where I needed to be, I want to be, and this is where a lot of my gifts and talents kind of come together. And for anybody who's wondering, I'm in my 50s, and I trained when I was 50. So age is completely whatever you make it out to be, has absolutely nothing to do with potential and what you can accomplish in life. So
Sudhita, that is just amazing. I'm in awe of everything you're sharing, going from somebody that was just defining themselves like this and to be able to really take it and I think become an advocate for change for so many people, right? That you've taken this and you've now helped so many people because of your story. So really grateful for you and thank you. Thank you for inspiring all of us. And so now we have a superpower because you're a mom by itself. And now we would love to hear your perspectives, Neelu, as a mother of somebody with autism, right? Your son has autism.
So first of all, I want to say thank you to Lavanya for asking me to be here. In all honesty, I wasn't sure if I if I wanted to be here because I needed to discuss this with my son and take his blessings because it is his diagnosis, and I'm just here to provide the perspective from a parent. But to my pleasure and surprise, he encouraged me to do this. So thanks, Lavanya, for asking me, first of all. And it led to this event of things. Thank you, Rachna and Anantya and Sudhita for sharing those experiences. Namaste, everyone. My name is Neelu again, and I am a parent of a neurodivergent teenager. His diagnosis is autism, and his challenges are struggle with fine motor skills, inattentiveness to details of tasks, organizational skills, and difficulty with visual spatial reasoning. All of these challenges impact his life in a significant manner. Even though he got the diagnosis when he was 7 years old, as a parent, I was always aware of his differences as early on when he was just a baby. But the spectrum is large and the developmental milestones have a big range, so it can be hard to diagnose it early on. As a parent, I've experienced the full range of emotions you might expect when raising a child with autism. In the beginning, I thought maybe this was something he would grow out of, or even something I could fix if I just tried hard enough as a mother. But over time, I realized that it wasn't about changing him. It was about embracing his unique abilities and understanding that being different doesn't mean being less. This was my first personal experience with neurodiversity, and I tried learning as much about it as I could manage. One thing I quickly learned is something what I shared with part of this group earlier, and something Rachna ji reiterated, is that when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Every individual on the spectrum is just that, an individual with their own strengths, own challenges, and quirks. Like every parent, I have done my best to provide him with the support he needs. I have advocated for him in school, ensuring he has an IEP, which is the individualized educational plan that includes accommodations. Privately, we have provided him with occupational therapy, intensive occupational therapy to work on his fine motor skills. I have exposed him to various extracurricular activities, hoping to find something he truly loves. At times, I might have come across as a tiger mom, running him every day to do taekwondo, another day to do soccer, drum lessons, classical music, learning another language. But really, it was never about pushing him. It's just about helping him find something that sparks joy and passion in him. Right now, he's a healthy teenager in high school, and like any parent of a teenager, I'm navigating this new phase of his life. Autism does present him with many challenges, but it's simply just one part of his story. And like any other child, he's constantly growing, learning, and surprising us. And what I've learned is that the best thing I can do is to continue supporting him. trust me, it hasn't been easy. And there have been certainly many heartbreaks along the way. Uh, but there have been wonderful moments and as well. And the growth and progress I see in him reminds me that every step of this journey is worth it.
It's amazing just hearing your story, Neelu, and really just your openness about all of the steps that you went through in the beginning, even feeling, can I fix, can I change? But then really just how to support and how to love and love unconditionally. And it's really, I think, just that's something that hopefully all of us can learn from what you've shared. So thank you. Thank you all for sharing your stories. I'm going to ask you, Sudhita, if you don't mind, as an advocate, could you give us some ideas? How can we address the stigma around neurodiversity, especially in the South Asian community?
That's a loaded question. Couple of things. Something that Neelu said, I want to highlight that when I share that I have 2 neurodivergent children, it is with their permission that I share that. That is, that's their story. That is not mine. So, Neelu, thank you for bringing that, into focus there, that it is with the permission of our children that we share that about them. Because this is the thing. This is, like I said before, just something that's different about them, right? It doesn't make them better. It does not make them broken. Okay. It's just different. And a lot of times what people don't understand is, and this is the addressing the stigma part of it. A lot of this comes with challenges with skills. Anantya talked about poor handwriting. Well, he went to the London School of Economics. He got an MBA from a top school. So guess intelligence is not the issue, right? It's the skills that need to back up that intelligence. It's organizing your binders, turning your homework in, getting it done, and forgetting that you have to turn it in, right? Or needing some extra time on the test because maybe filling those little bubbles in is difficult. Okay. So those are the things that when we look at it, why should there be stigma for somebody who's just born? We don't say that, oh, if you were born from a particular state or a particular family, or if you dress in a sari versus a salwar kameez or a pant or a skirt, we need to discriminate against you or treat you differently. This is all just the outer covering of who we are, which are divine beings on earth. So it's just name and form. Neelu's son is autism, mine is ADHD. Anantya's is dyspraxia. I'm sure there are other people in the room with other letters that go with that. And by saying that something's wrong, we're actually not honoring who Bhagwan made them to be. There is a reason why we are born the way we are born. We're born to the families that we are born. We have the parents, we have the sibling, the spouses, right? And on their end, there's a reason why my parents have me as a child, my husband has me as his spouse, my sisters have me as their sibling, right? And so what is the reason why Bhagwan put us where he put us, or Devi put us where she put us? And why can't we look at that inclusive, accepting, oneness in people versus saying there's something wrong or broken?
That's such a wonderful way of thinking about this, Sudhita. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Neelu, can I ask you if you have advice for fellow parents or caregivers of neurodivergent children or a neurodivergent individual?
Look, I know firsthand how exhausting it can be to care for a child who needs so much of you. So that's why my biggest piece of advice is to make sure that caregivers are taking care of themselves. And I know, and I know, and I know it's easier said than done, but I also know that it's absolutely necessary. You can't pour from an empty cup. And it doesn't have to be big things. For me, it's just time to get some fresh air outside, whether it's walking, doing yoga, or some sort of activity that will put me in touch with nature. That works for me. Second, find your village, a circle of friends or a support group who you can be completely authentic with. I am very blessed to have that inner circle of close friends and family. And talking about things with them can be therapeutic. So don't be afraid to do so. Do it based on your comfort level as much as you want to share. And if you don't have a circle yet, then I recommend finding a therapist who can listen without judgment. So having someone who can help you process everything, it's really helpful. And finally, something that took time for me to realize, and something that I have to thank my husband for, is that this journey is not about you. Caring for a neurodivergent child is not a measure of your parenthood. It's not about how good or bad of a job you think you're doing. It's really about, recognizing and responding to your child's needs and supporting them the best way you can. Your role is to guide and nurture them along the way without placing like the weight, of perfection or expectations on your shoulders. So once you stop making it about how you think you're performing as a parent, the experience becomes less about self-judgment and more about compassion and grace, both for your child and for you. So that's what I would say.
Amazing advice, Neelu. And really, what you had shared about having a village, I just wanted to put out there because I noticed there's many families from parenting culture who are joining. One of the families from parenting culture had actually asked if we could start doing a breakout room for people with children who are neurodiverse. And so in parenting culture on Monday nights, that will actually be one of our breakout rooms, because having a village and having that support system is huge. And so thank you for bringing that point out, Neelu, and thank you for all of the advice, all of the suggestions. And Anantya, you had mentioned about a lot of the struggles you faced when you were younger, bullying and things like that. Would you be comfortable to share a few of the struggles and strengths that you found within yourself?
Yeah. First of all, so sorry about that. My computer decided to have a major technical issue. So, happy to be back. I touched upon some of the issues with my dyspraxia in the past. I think on the social side with respect to the bullying, there was a real challenge. I felt like my peers were developing emotionally different than I was, and were able to pick up social cues and respond to social situations better than I was at a young age. And, that culminated in a lot of social anxiety. In the classroom, there was that issue with being able to pay attention, and with the exams, constantly running out of times in exams and doing really well in classroom assignments, but not doing as well in exams and tests, and the teachers being like, hey, is this because you didn't study? Like, what's really going on here? And then, even in practical matters, right? Like in life, one of the things that's been pointed out sometimes is like when I'm in large group settings, I sometimes feel a little overwhelmed, and I'm unable to maintain eye contact because of I struggle with processing you know, everything that's happening around me, and sometimes even struggle with like verbal coordination, you know, end up interrupting people and stuff like that. Also hopeless with directions and things like that. So that's on the weaknesses side, right? But I think, you know, before I dive into the strengths, you know, there's this book that really changed the game for me. It's called David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. And in this book, he really talks about how some really successful people in the world have been able to really leverage their strengths and find their hidden superpowers, and have really risen to prominent positions. You know, Richard Branson is one of them, who's dyslexic, and he talks about his dyslexia has really made him into a really special entrepreneur. You know, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, for example, he was dyslexic, but he had this incredible ability to persuade and connect with people. And, you know, he was able to like persuade someone to give him a job, right? So I think that the real thing is to really figure out what each of our hidden superpowers are, and to really channel that, right? And I feel like I've been able to do that, and I've been able to leverage that to even find some success even in the traditional paths, right? Where neurodivergent individuals may not find success so easily, right? I think a couple of things that have really worked well for me are like my strengths and resilience and my work ethic, right? Just because growing up as a child, I fell down so much and I failed so much, I became really good with handling defeat and became really feedback oriented. I remember when I was in 9th or 10th grade, I was doing really bad in my physics tests. I got the idea that, hey, I'm going to stay back after every physics class and, you know, come to the teacher with a bunch of questions and make sure all my doubts were filled. And, you know, ultimately I started doing really well in physics. And then, you know, for me, there's this, although my visual memory is super weak, I somehow have this compensating really high auditory memory where I can probably speak to any one of the panelists and I might meet them 5 years later and I'll still remember everything we talked about, right? And I think because a lot of us neurodivergent individuals have had to struggle at a very early age, that often breeds compassion and empathy, right? And for me in a workplace and even in a social setting, whilst I struggled with building relationships initially as a child, I've really been able to lean into that as a strength, the empathy and compassion. And, you know, now I've amassed a really significant network and I've been able to build buy-in in all of the different organizations that I've worked in, right? So I guess that's my message to parents and individuals in this room, right? It's the same from that movie, Tare Zameen Par. Every one of us has a gift, right? And that gift has so much potential to not only allow us to live better lives, but also impact society and the communities we live in.
So beautifully shared. I don't have anything to say in return. It's so beautifully shared. So lovely. Okay, you've left me a little bit speechless. So I'm gonna ask Mukul. Mukul, can you share some of the questions that were in Slido, please?
Thank you to this wonderful panel. I've been moved by everyone's questions or everyone's answers. And so now just transitioning to some questions from everyone. I will remind the audience that you can vote on which questions are most relevant because we will use this ranking in guiding which ones are the most pertinent to share with this panel. So the first question comes in with wondering how people can cope with the feelings of isolation or feeling misplaced when you are learning differently from others in the classroom. And whoever feels most pertinent, feel free to come off on mute.
I can take us, you know, I think first of all, the question says it there, right? It's learning differently. And unfortunately, classrooms are not designed for the different learner. They're designed for the majority of the people and how they may learn. And this is where diagnosis comes into play, right? Usually parents know that something is different. We may not be ready to accept it, but we know something is different. You're seeing your friends' children, other students in a classroom, you know that there's something different. And taking that, accepting that, getting a diagnosis, there may be grief and anger that comes with that. And you may need professional support to process that information, because sometimes it's like, why me, why my child, why whatever. The thing that I think changes when you know what the challenge is, because it's not you, right? The fault is not with you. The fault, so to speak, it's a system that's not designed specifically for your brain type. So then getting the supports that you can get, whether it's coaching, tutoring, physical therapy, therapy, psychotherapy, right? Medications where needed. Because what we're looking to do when you get those supports in is to level the playing field. It's not to make a person weak. It is actually to say, hey, by giving you time and a half, or making sure that you're doing your testing on a computer, right? You are now at par with other people. We're all putting you, versus there's being these differences, we're all kind of on the same playing field. The biggest thing with anybody that I work with, adults or students, is to embrace education and self-discovery. Figure out what works for you. Anantya talked about high auditory, learning. Some people it's visual, some it's kinesthetic, right? Learn what works for you and advocate for it. You need a quieter space. I don't go around in the world saying, hey, I have ADHD, but you know what I'll say? I focus best when the environment is quieter, when the space is more organized. You do not have to disclose. I actually encourage you not to disclose at work. If you have a learning disability, you can deal with that through HR and get support and reasonable accommodations. But the biggest thing is learn to advocate for yourself and figure out what works for me, and go out and to some extent create your own environment and create what works for you. Who said that because everybody does it one way, that everybody has to do it that way, right? Even with 3 neurodivergent individuals in our house, right? We're almost like the typicals in our house, right? My husband is a divergent one because there's only one of him and 3 of us. We all 3 learn differently, function differently. There are things that work for one of us that may or may not work for the other person. It's more about knowing myself and my children knowing themselves, and we as a couple supporting our children in whatever works for them.
Wonderful, thank you. You touched upon some of these concepts, but to dive into it more, as someone who has neurodivergent tendencies or abilities, how can that person stay productive, engaged with their to-do list, learning to be more time efficient while enjoying life, at the same time not feeling guilty about wasting time?
Mukul, you want me to take that one, or is that directed towards?
That one's open, whoever would like to answer.
Okay, well, I'll maybe, Anantya, Neelu, if you have insights in that one.
Well, go
Yeah.
ahead, Anand. You started off. Yeah.
I think, I think to echo what Sudhita was saying, I think it really depends on the individual, right? In terms of, for a lot of people, we think about managing time. Another way to think about it is, how do you manage your energy, right? Like, how do you manage the periods in the day where you feel like you're most productive and stuff like that? I think for me, just speaking personally, I heavily doubled down on like systems and processes and organizational systems. I use a couple of different softwares that allow me to diligently make lists and keep to-do lists. I use Evernote, for example, and I've been using that since 2011. And, I literally write everything down, and I've got a different notebook for the different aspects of my life. And then I also use stickies for more like day-to-day to-dos. And then increasingly, I've become very diligent with keeping a calendar. So that's more very tactical, right? I think in terms of, just the other types of stuff, right? Again, to echo Sudhita's point, for some people, there may need to be medication involved, right? For other people, it isn't, right? Mindfulness exercises, physical activity, all of these types of things can be useful in terms of managing energy levels and focus. I've benefited significantly from psychotherapy. I've been seeing a psychotherapist for many years, and that's done wonders to my self-esteem, and has also very practically helped change how I organize my life and manage some of these energy levels.
Yeah,
Very
I
good,
think
thank you.
I think Anantya, you covered it beautifully, both balancing your life and along with the whole list of tactical strategies that you can have, like creating a checklist and creating a balance for yourself. So I think that was a beautiful answer. And yeah.
You
There
unmuted.
can be so
Whoever would
many
like to start.
traits that can overlap even with neurodiversity and even without. So sometimes um, earlier on, I had showed kind of a wheel where you might see some traits with somebody, some traits with somebody else. And so lack of motivation by itself can be many things. Somebody with problems with their thyroid can sometimes feel that lack of motivation. Somebody with depression can sometimes feel that lack of motivation. So if that's kind of an isolated symptom by itself, it would be good to look into it to see if there's more, because there can be many reasons for it, is what I would say. Sudhita, I don't know if you have something else.
No, actually, exactly, Rachna. And one of the things to what Neelu said, right? If your child is struggling with their vision, what would you do? You're like, oh, okay, let's go get them glasses and let's find out. And, do they need to wear them all the time? Do they need to wear them sometime? You don't kind of ignore the fact that your child is struggling to read, or tell them to squint a little bit, or go and look at the whiteboard closely or whatever. We get them the support that we need. But the first thing is we've noticed that they were having trouble with their vision, and then got a diagnosis, got them the tools, whether it's glasses, contacts, whatever it is that they need to do that. Why would neurodivergence be any different? Right? And the moment I know whatever the letters are, whether it's, dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, they come, even though none of us have the exact same things, they come with a pool of symptoms or a pool of characteristics, not symptoms. They come with a pool of characteristics, which make it then easy for us to figure out that, oh, if a person is constantly late, what is the reason? Oh, ADHD comes with what we call time blindness, okay? It's not because we're bad people. It's because we don't understand time the way the rest of the world understands time. Now that I understand that about myself, I don't blame myself, but that doesn't mean that I give myself the pass either. I figure out mechanisms for me to be on time to things. It may be alarms, it may be whatever else my systems are. So having a diagnosis helps us leverage the strengths. People talked about CEOs of big companies who have that, right? Of have these things, and then mitigate the challenges that come with it, almost like leveraging the strengths to mitigate the challenges. But first, you need to know what you're working with. Being in blindness does not help. And then you're penalizing the child or the other adult because they keep feeling something's wrong with them, when there's nothing wrong with them. It's just a different neurotype.
Thank you. Next question is in the context for educators, specifically in the Balivihar settings, but all educators. How can they facilitate being more inclusive of children when they have limited time and context about the students? Any suggestions there?
I think sometimes just creating that space for any student who walks in the door, to create space to get to know them, to get to know what's important to them, to learn from them, right? Like so many times as body teachers, we learn more from our kids than we teach them. And so I think just coming in, recognizing that we're all there to learn with one another and to be open with each other, to appreciate what they bring, right? Whatever energy anybody brings into the room, to be able to appreciate that and find a place where we're all here, exactly what Neelu was sharing before, we're all here to see that oneness. So if we come in with that intention to find that oneness, then we will create the space for each other. Neelu, I think you were going to say something else. I don't know if you had something else you wanted to share.
Just want to add that usually in school settings, what I have seen for my son is that teachers have been supportive of getting him the accommodations that we have put in place. So that document really helps telling them about who he is as a person in the beginning of the school year. So whether it's a small group setting or whether it's extra time or whether it's certain other technical helps, like, if you want noise canceling headphones or whatever it might be. So the teachers are becoming more and more aware of these differences. So, and I'm very grateful for that, for finding that supportive environment from the teachers in school. And that's something which is what comes down to that we live in a society, where we see so much of ableism around us. It assumes that having a disability itself is wrong, like, that people, whether they have physical or intellectual or mental differences, they are somehow less than. So these are very devaluing beliefs. So I would hope that, as we are talking about it, just like right now on this platform, that people will realize that it's not anybody chose to do. Just like Sudhita said, it's not a box that anybody chose to do in the womb, that, I'm gonna be this way. So just accept them for who they are, just value them as individuals, and let them realize their potential. And one more thing I want to add is that, every neurodivergent person is not going to go on and become a CEO, or an Einstein or Elon Musk. Some of them are going to be just left with all the awkwardness of being a neurodivergent, and that's okay too. That also is an aspect. If there is not a gift that they have been able to find exist with that difference, that's okay. um so you have to constantly also stop talking about, oh, you have to find a gift. It's okay if there isn't any. Like Sudhita said, you're not better, you're not uh, you know you're not worse, you are who you are. And that's what I really want, this society where they don't look at any disability as, as something that they chose to do. Just accept them, just give them the gift of acceptance, is what, I want to leave everybody with that thought as my final say.
Thank you very much. There's a couple of questions regarding how we can identify neurodiversity in ourselves, and our children, and then us as adults. So I think the best way to phrase this question would be how we can identify it in ourselves, helping children identify it. Is there value in getting an official diagnosis even as an adult? And how do we go about doing this for children? Is there an official process? Anantya, could you share some of your experience there? And then if anyone else would like to add on.
Yeah, so I think that Neelu and Sudhita might even be able to add more to this, but happy to share my experience. So, I was lucky in that the schools that I went to had, faculty who dealt with these kind of issues. So typically it's an educational psychologist, or they'll be able to refer you to an educational psychologist, and the educational psychologist would then put you through like a very rigorous testing process. And, you know, ultimately at the end of that, you would get documentation in place, which you could then use to get accommodations. And you would also get a better sense of what the challenges are and what the diagnosis is. So, you know, typically you get to that point based on symptoms that you observe or symptoms that you've understood, or sometimes it's a teacher or whatever that's pointed things out and says that, you know, you have to go and speak to someone. If your school doesn't have this infrastructure built in, typically there's specialists in whatever city or country that you're in, right? So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone, Neelu or Sudhita ji, would you like to add on?
Mukul, can you repeat the question for me again?
Yes. Question was multifaceted on identifying neurodiversity in ourselves. How do we do that for children? And then how do we do that for ourselves as adults, and is it beneficial?
Yeah. So Anantya covered that whole, like the aspect of like neuropsychologists and educational psychologists. The thing I'll say is your first line of where you can get some answers are physicians like Rachna, who are pediatricians, or your internal medicine. You're noticing something that's different. You know yourself, you know your child, you know, you're noticing something. It's something to take to your physician and see. And like, you know, Rachna mentioned, it could be thyroid issues. It could be something else that's causing something there, right? It's not always neurodivergence. It's there, and they are the first line of defense, so to speak, for us. With respect to things like ADHD, there are online profiles that are there, free testing and assessments that are there that you can take that are good starting points. Remember that in a lot of these things, it's an ongoing pattern. You occasionally forgetting your keys or occasionally being late does not make you just a little bit, you know, I've heard this a lot. Well, isn't everybody a little bit ADHD? No. Everybody's not a little bit ADHD. You know, we have neurodevelopmentally, there is our nervous systems, everything are different. We have an ongoing pattern. You know, we have constant challenges maybe with time or getting our work organized or turning in things in school. So remembering some of those things will help. So when you're checking or taking those free assessments, is this something that you consistently have challenges with?
Yeah.
And to the last part, very briefly, there is value to those neuropsych evaluations because it reveals a lot of information. A well-done neuropsych evaluation will give you a lot of information because it could be ADHD, dyslexia, autism, whatever on the upper, but there could be a lot of underlying layers. There could be things like anxiety. There could be a lot of these, neurodivergence comes with friends is what I like to say. You know, it could be issues with depression, bipolar, a tendency more towards addiction, impulsivity that can land you in trouble, because you react differently in situations. So knowing that and having that is very helpful. Adults, it's a toss-up, but I will tell you that for almost any adult that I coach who has a neuropsychological evaluation, it's very, very helpful. I personally went through a reval 2 years ago, and it was very revealing because there were things, this time it was a well-done evaluation, so it revealed things that I wish I had known before.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something very small to that. You know, one thing I've noticed is that in popular culture these days, because so many more people are talking about their ADHD and dyslexia and other things, it's almost become popular for people to say, oh, I forgot something the other day. You know, I have so much ADHD, right? And it's very easy to make it about these one-off things, and it really is a pattern of these symptoms, right? And you know, to Sudhita's point, more often than not, it does have to be a pediatrician or educational psychologist to be able to properly observe those patterns in a clinical setting.
I can share a little bit just from a pediatric lens for people with little kids that when you do come into the pediatrician, they should be doing routine developmental screening. And at any point, if you're feeling like there is more of a concern, then they should be able to help you with that referral process. So completely agree with what both Sudhita and Anantya shared, that bring it up to your physician. At least they can help guide you to who the next person would be to take you down that path.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much to all of our panelists and Rachnaji for hosting this and facilitating this wonderful discussion. I am truly grateful that you guys shared openly and vulnerably. I learned so much, as did everyone else. Thank you very much for staying on later, and we hope you have a wonderful night. Thank you all in attendance and wish you all the best.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for,
so much for that.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Rachna, for moderating, and thank you, Neelu, thank you, Sudhita, and thank you, Anantya. Like Rachna said, I don't know, I'm speechless too. I don't know, there was so much information. I just wish like thousands of people could hear this. So thank you again for taking the time to share with us your experience and any thoughts that other people may be going through similar situations. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. And with that, I'll go ahead and close. Thank you again for all the speakers. Oh.